Hello and welcome to this special edition of Inspiring Doubt. Today we are here to discuss County Clerk Kim Davis, and I'm your host, Greg Bray, here with special guest Trey Jadlow. Did I say that correctly? I had never actually confirmed.
You did. That's right.
Okay, so Trey Jadlow is here with me today, and he is of the opinion that, I guess shares the opinion that Miss Davis does, that she is being persecuted in the situation here. I take the opposite opinion. So, Trey, I guess I wanted to open up by first of all saying welcome for the show, welcome to the show, and thank you for inviting me to do this. I know I'm hosting it, but this was something that you sort of threw out there. Let's do a hangout. So I always like that. My question to you then is, what really motivated you to want to do the hangout about this particular topic?
Well, you had made several comments over and over and over about how Kim Davis was an idiot and how she has no right to do what she's doing. And I, of course, yes, I do take a difference with you on that. And I wanted to challenge you. In fact, I think I may have said this. I'd like to know if you understand the historical context of the doctrine of the separation of church and state and what the whole original intent of it was.
Well, I believe I do. Of course, you are welcome to present your case today. And I wanted to just be clear right off the bat that I do believe that Miss Davis has a right to do what she is doing. She has a right to act in a certain or whatever way she'd like, right? I mean, civil disobedience is something that happens. It's a natural right, sort of a human right. Nobody can physically force her to sign these things, but this is not something that is a constitutionally guaranteed right, and that's sort of my argument, and it's the argument that is in line with, or the conclusion that's in line with the conclusions of basically every court who's heard her case. So I'm curious as to exactly what it is that differs. What is your argument that she should be able to refuse to grant these licenses due to her religious viewpoints, specifically her religious viewpoints?
Okay, well, you start off saying that she has a right to engage in civil disobedience. How do you come up with that?
It's really sort of just a logical aspect, right? Perhaps I shouldn't have used the term right, but nobody can stop her. There's not a way that I can say, no, you can't. She has this bodily autonomy, right? She can act in this way, but there are consequences to her actions. I mean, that may have not been the best wording for me to choose, but frankly, she has no constitutionally protected right to refuse this or to refuse to issue these. That's my position, and again, it's the position that the courts have taken. So I'm curious as to why you hold a differing position and what you seem to be of the opinion that the local courts, the state level, federal courts, and even the Supreme Court have all come to a incorrect conclusion about what her right to religious freedom means and how she is able to act. Now, she has, of course, been given the ultimatum from the judge that was originally put to a stay, right? I should have, I guess, covered a little bit of background. I assumed that everybody watching knows enough. But so Ms. Davis, as soon as the Supreme Court issued the Oberfeld versus Hodges decision, stopped issuing marriage licenses completely to avoid issuing any for same-sex marriages. Is that how you understand it as well?
Yes.
And then at one point she started issuing marriage licenses again, but not to same-sex couples.
Yeah, I believe that's what it is. I'm not really privy to a lot of the detail on it. And as we know, there's a change from the original post that you made, that she has actually been released from jail now and has been ordered by the judge. I actually
did update that on the prescription or the description, but just like an hour ago. So.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, good. Okay, good. Well, that helps. And so I'm trying to understand your perspective, though, because you have this dogmatic assertion, and you say that somehow she has this right to disobey the law, but then the Constitution says she doesn't. I don't understand how you reconcile that.
Well, and that's where I said my wording might not have been great, Trey. That I don't want to focus on the right to civil disobedience. I mean, civil disobedience has a long history, right? Lots of people have done this. When a person feels that a law is unjust, they can sort of put their neck on the line and refuse to follow that law. Of course, there are consequences to that, and sometimes the consequences include jail time, even up to execution. These things have happened throughout all of human history. There's nobody that can enter the mind of Ms. Davis, aside from maybe the God that you believe in, to physically force her to do this. Nobody can compel her in such a way to, of her own volition, use her body to do this act. They can coerce her, and in other ways put her in situational ultimatums. But in this regard, because she does have bodily autonomy, right? She controls her own body physically and directly. She cannot be physically and directly compelled to do something that she is not willing to do.
So you're not saying she has a right to do anything except what the Constitution tells her to do. In other words, she really doesn't have any rights other than that.
Well, I'm here to discuss the legal context of this. Now, can I ask, do you have any background as a constitutional or in constitutional law?
No, I make teeth for a living, okay?
Yeah, I also don't. I just wanted to establish that neither of us has credentials here where, it's not like I'm here to talk down to you on that regard. So given that I don't have credentials on this, I tend to defer to those that do. The experts of constitutional law who have assessed this have essentially unanimously stated that the decision of the courts has been correct. So I'm curious what argument you have that would disagree.
Okay, so essentially what you're telling me is you don't know why it's right or wrong, but somebody told you it's right or wrong. Therefore, you believe them, and you don't really want to own the idea of yourself. You just want to follow what people tell you. Is that what you're saying?
I'm talking about within the legal framework here. I don't want to talk about the morality associated with this, the underlying philosophy necessarily. We could get into that. But really, I mean, we're talking about an issue of constitutional law. You have, Ms. Davis has argued that she has a First Amendment right. So this is a constitutional appeal. This is an appeal to her constitutional rights to freedom of religion. Now, of course, the First Amendment states that Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Of course, I can see that she is probably intending to appeal to the second clause of that, to prohibiting the free exercise thereof. The decisions of the remainder of the court is that what she would be doing, acting as a public official in this manner, would be sort of a de facto establishment of religion, violating the first horn of that. So, and along with discrimination, that would be against the 14th Amendment and other things that she's looked at. So, I mean, do you have any sort of legal argument that agrees or disagrees with Ms. Davis? I mean, there have been plenty made. I'm curious as to what exactly you think on that topic.
Well, I think here's my thing, Greg. This is why I'm trying to get back to why you do the things you do. One of my passions for my life is to be able to own my ideas and think them for myself, and then live according to what is true rather than what people tell me. Okay. And now, when we're interpreting the United States Constitution, it's very important for us to understand what the reason was and what the milieu was for that brought about this Constitution that we have, and why we have this separation doctrine. That's why I wanted to ask you, do you know anything about the separation doctrine, where it came from, or where it's for, what it's for?
Well, sure, I believe I do, but it seems that you have an opinion that this has in some way been misinterpreted by the Supreme Court. and by the higher courts? Or are you still trying to argue on a philosophical level, completely disregarding the Constitution? I mean, because here's, if you want to talk about facts and reality, and sort of coming up with our own conclusions from there, is it a fact that we live in the United States and are under the rule of law of the United States government and Constitution?
Indeed, we do. And the question is what does it mean to be under the Constitution? What are the philosophical underpinnings? What are the contextual reasons why we have the Constitution and what it's for? You seem to be completely disinterested in the history of it and what it's for, and you just want to say, because somebody told me it's true, therefore I want to believe it and I want to push it on to others. And I'm challenging you to think.
That's really not the case. I'd like to hear your argument as to why these people who have told me this are wrong.
Okay, well, I have asked you to give me the justification for the First Amendment, and you keep dodging. Go ahead.
Well, right, because I'm hosting the show, and I've asked you to offer your argument as to why this decision is wrong and why Ms. Davis does have this right. I'd like to hear you present your case. I mean, we can get into the stuff about the underlying causes, but until we can sort of establish even, I mean, obviously you don't need to lay out the full detailed, point for point argument, but just a general summary as to what exactly your case is in this situation. Okay.
Well, when we originally came upon this thing, I said, Greg, I don't think you really understand the context of the First Amendment. And that's what I'm challenging you for right now. And all you got to do is say, I don't know, Trey. I really don't know. Can you help me out? I don't really know what I'm talking about. I don't know what the constitutional fundamental is. Could you explain it to me? That's what I'd like to hear from you.
Well, that's not really the case. I feel that as we talked about earlier, neither of us have a background in constitutional law and any sort of professional level, right? We've not had any formal education on that, but I'm sure you and I both have informal.
I know what the First Amendment is about. I know where it came from. I know the beginnings of it and the context of when it was done. And I want you to just say, I don't know, and humble yourself, and then I will explain it to you.
Well, I don't want to go down that rabbit trail at the moment here. That's the thing, Trey.
That's not the rabbit trail. That's what we're discussing, the First Amendment.
No, this particular show is to discuss Kim Davis and why you believe that the court got the decision wrong.
And it's based on the First Amendment, right?
Sure. And go ahead and make your case as to what about the First Amendment grants her this right.
Okay. Well, I want you to admit that you don't know what it is.
Why is that relevant or necessary?
Because you're bluffing. And that's why I wanted to have this with you. That it's really important to understand the doctrine in which.
No. The reason that you wanted to have this with me, Trey, is because you're hoping to get something that you can share randomly when you want to have sort of a sticking your, or biting your thumb at me sort of moment to say, look, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But that's because I didn't bring you on here to discuss as two lay people what our interpretation of the background of the Constitution really means. I mean, neither of us are historians. Neither of us are constitutional law experts or historians, right? We don't practice constitutional law. We don't practice the history of this as a professional field. We're lay people at best, and perhaps maybe lay experts. But you have come out on several occasions on your Facebook saying very explicitly, okay, this woman is being persecuted. This is persecution of Christians, right? This is the war on Christianity. Have you made that sort of statement?
Indeed, I have. Yes.
Why do you feel that way?
Okay, I'll go ahead and give it to you. I mean, it's obvious that you don't understand the history of it. But here's the problem: the Supreme Court does not have the right to make law. All they can do is interpret the Constitution. If they happen to have an interpretation of the Constitution that violates a fundamental premise of the original intent of the Constitution, therefore they are rogue justices making law that they do not have the right to do. And that's my assertion to the 5 justices that ruled in Obergefell. They abrogate the First Amendment by making another law that is necessarily in irreconcilable odds with the very first amendment of our Constitution, of the Bill of Rights. So would you agree that homosexuality and Christianity are at irreconcilable odds?
I am not a practicing Christian. Therefore, I will leave that up to Christians to state. You, I believe, are. You can take. I'm not really going to take a position on your faith.
Okay. Well, throughout the entire 2,000 years of history of Christianity, there's never been an acceptance of homosexuality as normative within Christian practice. Now, there are some people today who would say that they are, but we're living in a postmodern society where they say there's no such thing as right or wrong. And we're living in an age of probably some of the greatest irrationality in the history of Western civilization. So there are also people who call themselves Christians that do not believe in, they don't believe in God, and they call themselves Christians. So we see all kinds of crazy stuff going on. But for the entire history of the Christianity, and the Bible is unequivocal about that. People can argue about slavery, although the arguments I think are weak and silly that were used in the antebellum America. They cannot argue about homosexuality. It's a completely different argument altogether. So therefore, if in fact it is true that homosexuality is at irreconcilable odds with Christianity, then it's not possible to have a peaceful coexistence with those two worldviews. And in doing so, you have to elevate the homosexual rights, the new right that has just been invented, up and above the religious right, which is the foundation of our Constitution.
Okay, one quick. You talked about the very first amendment, right? That was your. You mentioned that at one point in there. Does the numerical order of amendments matter?
Well, I think they do. Yeah, I think the First Amendment is the most important one. That's why it was made the First Amendment.
I mean, do you have any sort of constitutional basis for that? In the rule of law, does the number of the amendment have any sort of bearing as far as supremacy or primacy?
I don't know that in an official sense, but I would say probably so, since they made that the very First Amendment, that would be prime in their minds. Would you think so? Do you think? I
believe that the first 10 amendments were all passed at the same time. I don't think.
Right, but they numbered one as number one, right?
Sure, but I don't. As far as I'm aware, there's no legal basis for any amendment taking primacy over another.
Okay.
They are.
Okay, so now you're saying the First Amendment is not as important then.
I'm saying that it is equally important as every other amendment to the Constitution, as well as the Constitution in general, right? It does not supersede any other portion of the...
Yeah, but if you don't have the freedom of redress or the freedom to gather together or the freedom of speech, you don't have a free country. Do you agree with that? That's why it's number one.
Oh, that may be why it's number one, and that may... I agree that it's true. If you don't have those freedoms, you don't have a free country. The same is also true, though, if you don't have equal protection under the law. It's true if you can have the government just take your house for quarter. It's true if the government can seize your assets and property without due cause. So, I mean, all of these amendments are here to protect the freedom, right? So to say that you don't have freedom without that one is sort of silly. And I mean, there are some amendments that might be a bit outdated, such as, say, the giving quarter one that I think that just doesn't really happen anymore. But it's a bit of an anachronism because it was very common at the time it was written. But it's just like the militia aspect of the Second Amendment, where there's really not militias anymore. But in these things, they're maintained for whatever reasons. We don't amending the Constitution again is quite a cumbersome process, so I don't see a reason to change these things that just aren't particularly relevant anymore, because they could become relevant, right? So otherwise, though, I don't see any legal precedent or any historical basis for the numerical order of the amendments having any primacy over another one. The First Amendment does not overrule the Second Amendment, and so on down the line, right? It's all equally, this is the Constitution. The amendments are just part of the Constitution that were added after it was initially drafted and signed. Is that?
Yeah. In fact, let's see, four of them were based off of the Petition of Right, which was written by Sir Edward Coke in 1628 or so. And this is the thing. There's a historical context to this whole thing, and the doctrine of the separation of church and state was not invented by our founding fathers. It originated in 1644 in England. It's a man named Roger Williams. He was the founder of the First Baptist Church in America, who was an amanuensis to Sir Edward Coke, who was the Chief Justice of England during the Elizabethan period. Went around with this guy named Sir Edward Coke, and I don't know if you're familiar with Edward Coke, but he's the guy that came up with the castle doctrine, every man's house is as his castle. He was very much into personal rights, and much of what we have in our documents came directly from his work. He's considered, I don't know if I said the greatest jurist of his day. And so Roger Cook was his stenographer. He followed him around as a secretary, and when he was 13 years old, he was kind of a father figure to him. And so Roger Cook helped, I'm not Roger Cook, Edward Cook helped Roger Williams get his education, and he went to Cambridge and won all kinds of awards, a very intelligent man. And because he was a Puritan, and because of the initial persecution under Charles II, he had William Laud, was his, the Archbishop of Canterbury was moving into a Roman Catholic territory. As you, I don't know if you're familiar with English Reformation history, but they would go back and forth from Protestantism to Catholicism. And so William Laud was moving back in that direction, and they were very heavy-handed. If you did not follow the laws, and they were moving into sacerdotal justification, where the church must give you the sacraments, and it was antithetical to the doctrines of Protestantism. And so this guy, William Laud, was very heavy-handed, and they might cut your ears off and throw you in jail or maybe kill you. And so Roger Williams fled. Well, he also was a big fan of not only Edward Cook, but also of Francis Bacon, the father of the modern scientific method. He was he said that Bacon said that truth is not the daughter of, well, he said truth is a daughter of time, not the daughter of authority. And he basically said we need to take ideas and we need to put feet on them, and we need to practice them and test them to see if they can.
Sure. So I think you're trying to drive into the purpose of the First Amendment, right, or the freedom of religion. You mentioned Edward Cook and sort of that the heavy-handed changes between Protestantism and Catholicism in England at the time that this was going on. So what was your point you were driving towards with that before we get, because we do have a limited amount of time.
Sure. You've got Edward Cook talking about individual rights. You've got Francis Bacon saying we need to verify things and not just believe them. And by the way, Edward Cook and Francis Bacon were arch rivals. Francis Bacon was really kind of a dog. He supported King James in trying to make the rule of king be absolute. So you've got all these rights that were built up. What's that called? The writ of habeas corpus was invented by Sir Edward Cook. So Roger Williams has all this influence, and he has to flee, and he comes to America, and he comes to the American colonies, and himself, especially in Massachusetts, he's invited to be the pastor of the Boston Church, which is the most exclusive church there, and he says, no, I don't want to be a part of it. And he starts standing up for individual rights. And he starts making doctrines or trying to promote doctrines that are the separation of church and state. Roger Cook was the founder of Rhode Island. And he was greatly persecuted because they were afraid that if you separate the church and state, you will have chaos. And Roger Williams said, what we need to do, he was afraid of mingling church and state, because he said, the government has no law over the first table of the Ten Commandments, which is the first 4 commandments. That's our duty to God. And he said,
okay, so is that really the point, that the government law can't supersede the law of God? Is that sort of where you're going with this?
No, I'm trying to get the context of Roger Williams.
But again, we have a limited amount of time, so I'm not trying to say, well, I am, I guess, saying we don't have time to go through all the detail of this. I'm sure there's quite a bit of interesting detail associated with it, but is there an end point to this that you're getting at? And if we
never mind that education stuff. We're just talking on the wind here.
Right. Well, I mean, the education is important, right? But it's also available in other places.
There's a context that's necessary for this.
Sure. Oh, so you believe the context is necessary, and in that regard, I guess I want to know what's. We still haven't even covered exactly what your argument is here. So we're now 27 minutes into this broadcast, and you haven't really made a clear case aside from saying that Oberfelsch was overreaching. We have rogue Supreme Court judges, right? That was you've said that because they don't have the right to create law. They only have rights to interpret the Constitution, and if their interpretation of the Constitution goes beyond where it now, you're aware that Miss Davis is not protesting the decision. She's not out here or in jail because she's fighting Oberfelsch. I'm sorry, I don't actually know.
Obergefell.
Obergefell. Okay, yeah, I don't know how to say that. I've only seen it in print. So, Obergefell. So she's in there because she believes that her being told that she needs to issue same-sex marriage licenses violates her religious conscience. Right? For her to be forced to do that would be irreconcilable in her eyes.
Right. And that was my point. That
sure.
Homosexuality is irreconcilable with the First Amendment. You cannot reconcile the two.
I don't necessarily disagree. I mean, like I said, I leave it up to Christians to interpret their own faith. But that does not necessarily mean that she's being persecuted. You see, because she's not being forced to issue these licenses. Well, I mean, you might be.
Jail?
She was in jail because she refused to either issue these licenses or resign her post, where that is part of the job and an important part of the job.
So she was saying either given the boot to quit your job and leave, or you will go to jail, or do what we say. You're not saying she's not being forced to do something?
No.
She went to jail because she wanted to.
Yes. She went to jail because that was the option she thought was the best. She did not want to leave the job.
She was given options then.
She was given the two. She didn't want to leave the job that she was in. This job is a legacy for the record. Her mother had the job before her. Her son works in her office. She did it for 26 years as an assistant clerk, so I don't know what the exact terminology is, but she did this job under her mom for 26 years. Her mom didn't seek the position again. She applied for it. She was elected, mind you, under the Democratic ticket. So I mean, for those who want to say that this is a Republican Democrat thing, I just want to remind people of that. But then when this decision came about, she was informed that she could no longer not issue marriage licenses to homosexual couples.
Oh,
right? So
they told her what she had to do.
Well, they told her what she cannot do as an agent of the government.
Right. Which
is she an agent of the government?
Requires her to do what they said, right?
Well, is she acting as a private citizen in her job as a clerk?
No, she's a publicly elected official.
Right. So she is an agent of the U.S. government in her role.
That's right.
There, right.
So Christians can no longer hold positions in the U.S. government because of their religion, right?
That's not at all the case.
In this position.
Well, in her particular position, a Christian who holds this particular belief is not suited for that task.
Right. So she doesn't have the freedom to practice her religion in her job, right?
That's not true. She has the freedom to practice her religion in her job. She just cannot apply for. I mean, you seem to make the argument that a pacifist can be or let's say a Jainist or a Jehovah's Witness who refuse to participate in the military could go into the military and just refuse to do anything. Right? They could.
No. When she took her oath of office, they did not say, when you take this oath of office, you will be required possibly to blaspheme your God to hold this position.
No. However, she had worked in the office for 26 years prior to this.
Yeah.
The courts had been making decisions like this all around, and it had been known at the time because she didn't get she wasn't sworn in until January of this year. So it was known to her that this case was coming up in the Supreme Court.
Give me a break.
That's so tenuous. You really want to make the argument that she's so ignorant that working in this field where she's issuing marriage licenses, she's not
knowing
aware
that
this was going to be coming up.
So knowing that Obergefell was coming up, she should have dropped her post thinking, oh, maybe someday I might have to do gay marriages. Therefore, Christians, again, you're saying Christians cannot hold to this position because of the religious conviction.
I'm saying that you, Trey, are saying that a person in an elected in an official government agency, right? They're working as a agent of the U.S. government, can act in such a way that their religion is being imposed upon other people.
Wait a minute.
Is that not violate?
Well, wait a minute. Is a view being imposed upon Kim Davis?
No.
Oh, really?
No. I don't see where please make the argument that it is.
The idea that
you know what? I'd love to see your argument here as to why a view is being imposed upon Kim Davis that she personally must support gay marriage. Please go ahead and make that argument as to why she does not have the right
to sign her name and say, I endorse homosexual marriage. This is the whole thing.
No, she doesn't. She has no requirements to do that.
Then why is she in jail?
Because she refuses to resign the position that requires that.
So why would she need to resign her position?
She is not required to do that.
Why must she resign
the county clerk of Rowan County, Kentucky, is required to do that.
Well, not according to Kentucky law.
She does not need to be the county clerk. Now, this is not according to Kentucky law. I've seen this argument come up a few times. It's an interesting thing because it's not the argument she's making. Yeah, I think Huckabee.
But you can say though she's
went ahead and made that one. Right. Her lawyer is not making that argument. Nobody in her actual legal team has tried to say this is not the law of Kentucky. Now, the law of Kentucky requires that the county clerk issue marriage licenses. Right. And the Supreme Court in Obergefell decided that due to the 14th Amendment, one group of people cannot be excluded from such a thing. If you're going to grant marriage licenses at all, and the state of Kentucky does that, it's not up to her to decide as the county clerk whether she is going to grant marriage licenses. It's part and parcel with the role. So the state of Kentucky could choose to stop issuing marriage licenses entirely. That's something that they could legislate and stop doing. But they haven't. So as long as they are issuing marriage licenses, it has been decided that the 14th Amendment does not allow them to only issue them to heterosexual couples.
Okay, so you are saying that there is a view being imposed upon Christians who would hold to the sinfulness of homosexuality.
No, you are. You're saying that that's what is happening. I'm saying
so she's not being asked to do anything that violates her conscience, right?
Well, she's being given an option.
Is she given the orders to violate her conscience in her job?
No, nobody has ordered her that she must.
Then why did she go to jail?
Because she refused to resign her position, which is the option that she has. If not, I don't see how you see that she, as a government official.
I think it's funny how it can go one way, but it won't go the other way. In other words, yes, she's forcing her view on everybody else, but nobody's forcing any view upon her.
But Trey, she's a government official. Her view.
Oh, so it's okay then. They can do it to her.
Yes, of course they can say.
They are doing it now.
And absolutely, they can say that anybody in a position of government official needs to act in ways that are.
So now you can see, you change your mind. Now they are forcing.
I'm saying that they're forcing it upon the position, and she is in the position.
That's right. And since she's in a position, they're forcing it upon her. Yeah, it's either violate your conscience or leave the job. We will put you on the street, right?
No, there's no we will put you on the street.
Oh, we'll put you in jail. Sorry, we'll put you in jail.
No, that's if she chooses not to quit her job. This is you're here chuckling and laughing because so you seem to be too ignorant to understand the reality of the consequences you're trying to argue for here. So please explain to me what is substantially different between this and a Muslim clerk in the DMV refusing to grant a driver's license to a woman. I mean, this is not even an elected official, right? But please go ahead and explain to me how that would be substantially different.
Okay, well, a Muslim, the religion of Islam is our guest because they have no provision for the separation of church and state in their doctrine. In fact, if you give provision for that, you are an apostate.
Doesn't matter.
Oh, no, it has
absolutely no bearing on the Constitution. The Constitution is freedom of religion, right? That the government can make no law.
Greg, think about it. If somebody else's religion causes destruction to our Constitution, can it be supported? Think about it.
Then you're arguing against Christianity right now, right? That's
how so?
If it's causing destruction to the Constitution, because what you're trying to argue for is a violation of the 14th Amendment. The Constitution was based upon a
Christian meta-narrative, my friend. This is my whole point. You don't want to do the history lesson.
You're making this is a Christian nation argument?
I'm not.
Because I'd like to point you to the Treaty of Tripoli or many of the other writings that are officially state that we are not a Christian nation, right? This is, I mean, a great amount of the founding fathers were deists at best. Yeah, some were Christian, and many of them came from a Christian background because they grew up in the West where Christianity was the dominant religion, right? That is,
the entire West is based upon the Christian meta-narrative. Are you familiar with King Alfred's Law?
I'm not, no.
Okay, well, in the, I think it was the 10th or 11th century, he came up with Alfred's Law Code, which is the foundation for all Western jurisprudence, and he based it upon the 10 Commandments.
You seem to want to take this into the point of we can add things or read things into the Constitution that aren't there. Again,
no,
this is a question of constitutional
I'm trying to read it in
law.
Context.
Yeah, it's a question of constitutional law and the political philosophy associated with it, right?
That's right.
You are arguing that
from a context,
her constitutional right is being violated, right? You're saying that her constitutional right is being violated because she's not being allowed to discriminate in violation of the 14th Amendment.
No, the 14th Amendment was not written for homosexuals. That's not the context of the 14th Amendment.
But why would the context of the 14th Amendment matter?
Oh, yeah. Never mind the
14th Amendment.
Whatever we want it to say, right?
The 14th Amendment guarantees equal protection under the law, right? So that has been applied in many different situations. It's not simply been applied to slavery, right? As a matter of fact, it was the 13th Amendment that freed the slaves. The 14th Amendment was the one that guaranteed that the slaves the freed slaves will not be persecuted. And that still, it took quite some time for that to occur, but that's where, the entire civil rights movement was based upon that. Mm-hmm. That if we hadn't had the 14th Amendment in place, we wouldn't have been able to guarantee civil rights, women's rights, that a large amount of things that were not recognized beforehand. Now, will you say that the 14th Amendment was written specifically for women?
It was written for equal protection of people to be treated equally, but homosexuality is not viable in the paradigm of the founding fathers of the Constitution, which was based upon the Christian meta-narrative. It is an irreconcilable odds. You cannot have the freedom of religion and the freedom of erotic liberty to be, when they can never be reconciled together. You've got to have one.
That is the most asinine statement I have ever heard. I really can't imagine where in your mind you're coming up with this. We can't have people having sex however they want and still have freedom of religion, right? Because freedom of religion means that me, as an atheist, I'm allowed to exist. That's right. I can say that your God is imaginary. That's right. And nobody can throw me in jail for that.
And that's the glory of the separation doctrine.
Isn't it? Right?
No,
I am blaspheming.
I am passionate about your having the freedom to say that. That's what Roger Williams is all about.
Am I blaspheming when I say that?
Yes.
Yes. So if I say that your God is a figment of the human imagination, that is me committing blasphemy.
Well, I don't know if I call that. I don't know if I call it blasphemy. It's just a statement. If you're
all right, your God is. Should I quote Richard Dawkins here? The God of the Old Testament is. I don't have it committed to.
Yeah. That's blasphemy. I'll grant you that.
Okay, so that's blasphemy, right? So, what's stopping the local Christian sheriff to throw me in jail?
Our Constitution.
In what manner? Why does that stop the local Christian sheriff from throwing me in jail for that?
Because you are allowed the freedom of speech.
Okay. Am I also allowed the freedom of religion?
Indeed, you can.
So,
you're free to not be a Christian.
So I'm not only allowed to state those beliefs, but I'm allowed to hold those beliefs, right?
Indeed.
So if I happened to hold the belief that Christians should be thrown into volcanoes, would I have the right to do that?
No, because the whole purpose of the government is to bring peace and order to society. And we've got somebody that's using their freedom to do that which is destructive to society. Then we have an obligation as a government to limit those freedoms. Freedom is always in context of promoting existence. Okay,
so now we're going to promoting existence, and that's going to be an argument against homosexuality. Then again, to sort of a natural law aspect away from the Christian side of it, to say that
those who practice homosexuality have no meta-narrative. They have no matrix for bringing unity out of diversity. This is another reason why all the founding fathers unanimously signed to the idea that God is the one that gives us the rights, because that serves as a moral imperative to
but again, your God is imaginary. And I have that right to believe that, and I can even hold public office with that, because no religious test is allowed for me to hold that, right? So I mean, if my governor of the great state of Wisconsin here, Scott Walker, and mind you, this is not too far out of the realm of possibility, introduced a bill is saying that atheists cannot hold public office, that you have to be a Christian. As a matter of fact, you have to be the particular brand of Protestant that Walker happens to be. What would happen to that law?
You mean he didn't do that? You're just saying if he did?
Right, if he did, yeah, if he did that, what would happen to that law? Well, assuming then the incredibly...
it would be a violation of the First Amendment. That's the whole problem.
So that law would become invalid, and if then I were to try to get into office and somebody were to try to enforce that law, say they would not put my name on a ballot because I haven't passed this religious test, even though the Supreme Court has issued a verdict saying that that is not a constitutional law and cannot be enforced. What would be the recourse if this Christian clerk then said, nope, I have to enforce this law, that you cannot, as a non-Christian, hold office here? What would happen to that clerk?
Well, they would be violating the oath that they took.
Right.
So
what would happen?
That clerk has an obligation to the Constitution as working for the government. So as does Kim Davis.
Okay. So thank you for agreeing with my point then, and you have a wonderful evening. I mean, that's really what it boils down to, right? That the clerk has a responsibility to uphold the Constitution. The Constitution has been officially declared by the branch of the government that has that job.
Again, Greg, we go over this again and again. Their decision to quote interpret the Constitution violates the First Amendment. Therefore, it's not a valid.
You have not explained in what way it violates the First Amendment. You've claimed
because again, I said
forcing her to not practice her religion, but that's not true.
No, I said that homosexuality and that Christianity are at irreconcilable odds. They cannot be reconciled. So one is going to have to be given precedence over the other. We're going to promote homosexuality or erotic liberties, and we're going to put down religious liberties.
But that's true. That's true of Islam and Christianity as well, right? It's true of Hinduism.
As I said, Islam is our guest because they cannot live in a world of separation of church and state. It was a Christian that came up with the doctrine of separation of church and state. Jesus said, give to Caesar what is Caesar, and what is to God, to God's. Uzziah walked into the temple and offered up what the priest had done, and he got leprosy. There's a separation of church and state in the Bible. Okay, you see, this is a Christian doctrine that you're arguing here, and you think you're cutting a fat hog in the belly, but you don't understand it.
I don't have a problem arguing for some of the doctrines that are included in the Bible. I mean, hey, the golden rule, right? That's not too bad. I mean, sure, there was about 1,000 years beforehand the same rule stated in a positive manner instead of a negative, which I think is a better overall thing. But or I think it was actually even more than 1,000 years before. Regardless, we have as somebody who rejects the authority of the Bible doesn't mean that I can't recognize a good idea in it, right? But the question is why it's a good idea. Why is it necessary to have a separation of church and state?
Okay.
In what way does a separation of church and state protect your right to be a Christian? In what manner is that possible? Like, what is the purpose of the First Amendment from a Christian perspective?
Okay. Yeah. Well, if you let me finish my little history lesson, we could have gotten there. But Roger Williams was worried about people being forced into religion. That's the worst thing you can do for Christianity. And that's what the conquistadors did when they went to South America. The colonists came here to the Indians and they tried to force them to become Christians. And they appealed to Roger Williams when he was in England. He went back for a while and he got Oliver Cromwell to send a protection for the Indians. And it's the separation doctrine is a key element to our country. It's one of the reasons why America is the greatest country in the world. This is one of the reasons why Christianity in Europe died, because they never took this doctrine of the separation of church and state for what it should be. It must be something that is taken through argumentation. Greg, I want to interact with you, and I don't want you to follow me because I say, this is right, you need to believe it, trust me. I want us to wrangle with our ideas, and I want to win your heart by your mind and defeat your argumentation, or have you defeat mine. That's how America works.
Well, I mean, you refuse to present your argumentation in whole. I presented mine on more than one occasion, but really, my argumentation has been presented on many occasions through all sorts of legal decisions, and of course the legal decision isn't just the Supreme Court, right? You can find the arguments put out by the attorneys and the official decisions that explain quite a bit more about why the decision was put into place. I mean, we have things like the Lemon Law that establish, I don't remember the exact name of the case, Lemon versus something, but it establishes sort of a test for how we know if something is a acceptably, I guess, secular or acceptable in light of the First Amendment as a law, right? That the laws cannot have a, I'm actually just going to look it up here because I don't remember it very well. So Lemon Law apparently is not the way to search for that. That brings you up to the one about cars. Lemon Pest, that's what I want. Lemon versus Kurtzman, here it is. So the Lemon Test, a statute must not result in an excessive government entanglement with religious affairs. This is the entanglement prong: factors, the character or purpose of or institution benefited, nature of the aid states provide, resulting relationship between government and religious authority. And number two is the statute must not advance nor inhibit religious practice, also known as the effect prong. And three, the statute must have a secular legislative purpose, known as the purpose prong. Right. So this is a pretty fundamental decision here on. It's from only 1971, so it's less than 50 years old, but it's a decision that really sort of puts into perspective, and there's a lot of argumentation behind that. Have you read any of that, the history of Lemon versus Kurtzman? You seem to have a lot of the classical literature, but as far as the modern day arguments about these laws, have you? I'm not assuming that you haven't. I'm curious if you have.
No, you can't deal with the arguments. So you're jumping from here to here and there to there. Oh, there's new argument. I know this person. I know that person. I'm trying to talk the substance, and you're just jumping around saying, "Oh, let's just trust what everybody tells us." Why don't we examine what these people say? I
tried going that route with you, right? I tried to ask you what is the purpose of the First Amendment from a Christian perspective. How does a separation of church and state protect your right to be a Christian? Why would you want it, and not just a Christian, but to be whatever, I don't know how you would describe your specific. Are you Calvinist? Reformed?
I'm a Reformed Baptist.
Reformed Baptist. Okay, so
well, just like Roger Williams, the man who made it up.
So in that regard, then, I mean, you've got a particular set of beliefs that are not shared by all other Christians, right? As a matter of fact, there's a very, very large set of Christians that don't share these beliefs. There are some that are fundamentally shared among most branches of Christianity. But in what ways could your religious freedom be affected if people in government offices were allowed to make decisions based on their own personal religious beliefs instead of on the established laws and the this doctrine of equal protection and freedom of religion?
I don't understand. It has anything to do with it. You're making my point for me. I mean, I'm all for the separation of church and state. That's the whole point.
But you're not here. You're saying that a government agent should be able to act in such a way that she enforces her religion upon other people.
Yeah, if the law that she's being forced to do is necessarily unconstitutional. That's the whole point. We're fighting for the Constitution here, not for the First Amendment. You're trying to destroy the First Amendment.
You're making an argument that her lawyer made and that plenty of other people have made, and that was by the group that is ordained in the situation here to make this decision, right? They're not. You and I have no authority over.
They are not ordained to make law. They are ordained to interpret the Constitution.
They're ordained to interpret the Constitution, right? That's
right. That's all they can do. They cannot
Article 2, Section 3, that it says that they ordained and established. They can, that's sort of what puts out the purpose of the Supreme Court, and one of their functions is to interpret. What is it? The writ of certiorari that. They interpret if a law is within the scope of the Constitution or not.
That's right.
Right. And they, in that capacity, have
abrogated the First Amendment.
You still have not established that they've abrogated the First Amendment.
Why is Kim Davis in jail? Why did she go to jail?
She went to jail because she tried to, as a government agent, enforce her religion upon other people.
So somebody forced her to jail because she didn't comply, right?
So again, let's go back to the court clerk who's going to say that I can't get my name on a ballot because I'm an atheist here. What is my recourse then? If you say that the government can't come here and put her in jail,
who says that you can't be on the ballot because you're an atheist?
This was the hypothetical from earlier, right? That you said this person is violating the Constitution.
That's right.
Say this should happen, right? It goes the Scott Walker and the Wisconsin Republican legislature passes this law that says only Christians can hold office in the state of Wisconsin.
Have you ever said anything like that in any way?
Mm-hmm. No, it's a complete hypothetical.
Okay,
it's just this is just throwing that out there.
I know there's some crazy people out there, so yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me too much. I'd expect it more from Mike Huckabee, though. To be honest, that
be a grown up. Come on.
I'm. This isn't me dragging anybody through the mud. Mike Huckabee has made some statements that are pretty close to that. So that's why. I mean, from Walker, he doesn't pander much to the religious side. Really, he's really more of the economic side. But Huckabee is very strongly about the religious arguments. So. Regardless, if such a law were passed, and because there are in 7 states.
How could it be passed? It's unconstitutional.
Because we pass unconstitutional laws all the time, right? There's no way during
this law that was just passed could be that this Obergefell could be unconstitutional, then, right?
By definition, no.
It can't be. It can't. It abrogates the First Amendment, but it must be set in stone because it follows your dogma.
By definition, though, it's. The authority that has the specific position of interpreting the Constitution has declared it as that this is how the Constitution. So
and no, can't be wrong.
I never said they can't be wrong.
Oh, okay.
But
the decision can't be wrong.
But who are we to say that they're?
Oh, yeah, they're the kings. We live in an oligarchy.
That's their job.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not my job. It's not your job, right? So, but again, you're making an argument that's no different from, say, instead of some sort of muckraking here, let's say I took over the governorship here in the great state of Wisconsin, and I had a bunch of my atheist cronies out here who we decided we are going to pass laws abolishing or stating that no permits can be issued for churches to be built, or any construction permits whatsoever for churches, right? That churches can no longer be built or have any sort of modifications done. And somebody goes into a local office and tries to apply for a permit on that. And then that goes up to the Supreme Court, right? And the Supreme Court says, yeah, you can't do that. That's not allowed. That is clearly in violation of the First Amendment.
I think you're just wasting time because you don't have anything to say.
Well, so I'm getting to the point here where now the Supreme Court says you can't do that, right? That's their job, right? They say you can't do that. But somebody's going to sit there and make the same argument you are. Well, who is the Supreme Court to tell me how the Constitution is supposed to be?
How about we just look at the Constitution, homie?
But that's the thing is, clearly people can't agree on it, right? So there has to be some sort of institution in place.
So the judges are the final authority, not the Constitution. They can say whatever they want because somebody's got to interpret it, and they're the boss. Let's just follow them. Let's put our heads in a basket.
This is the most juvenile argument I've seen in an extremely long time. You're basically just saying, no, you're not the boss of me.
You're basically saying I follow them because they're the boss. And they say what I like.
Well, I'm saying that the reality in the United States is that, yes, that is the case. That they are the institution that has the ability to make decisions.
Make law.
Well, to interpret and determine if a law is allowed. Again, we established that the state of Kentucky can choose to stop issuing marriage licenses, right? We talked about that earlier. It can. The state of Kentucky could choose to stop issuing marriage licenses. It hasn't. And as long as it hasn't, and as long as it is the job of the county clerk to issue marriage licenses that are legally allowed, and it's required that this clerk does this as long as people are applying and according to the laws, then they cannot discriminate according to the Supreme Court and the 14th Amendment here based on
homosexuals.
I'm sorry?
Discriminate against homosexuals.
No, they can't. That's kind of what the whole decision was about.
No,
right?
It's not, because homosexuality is at irreconcilable odds with the First Amendment. You can't have both. It's one or the other. Do we want homosexuality or what? Freedom of speech, freedom of religion.
So you're saying that it's. I'm really just dumbfounded here that we can't have homosexuality and still have free. So what should be done with the homosexuals then, Trey?
Well, I don't think homosexuals is a class of people. Can you name for me the biological markers that make someone a homosexual?
Can you name for me the biological markers that make somebody autistic?
Yes, there are traits that are
biological markers. I'd like biological markers.
No, I guess not.
Okay, so then that's an unreasonable standard. I can tell you one thing is that there are people who are sexually attracted to. They're sexually and romantically attracted to people of the same sex.
Okay, listen. If somebody is autistic, can they not be autistic as well? In other words, it's a disorder of the body that that is not something people pass into and out of through feeling. It's been widely proven that people can pass from homosexuality or from gender dysphoria at large measures. How does that happen if it's biological?
There's people who get cancer and it goes away entirely on its own as well. I mean, there's people who have two uteruses.
Yes, but those are all biologically markered, though, right?
I don't. So your argument is that homosexuality doesn't really exist. Then is that? I mean, so those who refuse to change, then Trey, let's just ignore the homosexuals as a real class, right? Since you're going to make the argument that it's not a real actual class because there's not biology. So let's say people who choose to practice homosexuality, right? They feel that they are homosexuality, or sorry, they feel that they are homosexuals, and that's a strong part of their personal identity. But they choose to continue this rather than to do something different. What should be done with those people?
Well, I think that from my perspective, they need to be loved, and that my loving them.
What if they like kiss in public?
I would like to love them, but I want to have the freedom to talk to them about that and how it lines up with what is reality.
Has anybody denied you that freedom to talk to them?
Yeah. Kim Davis is being denied the freedom to practice
she's not being denied the freedom
to
talk to them.
She cannot tell them to repent, and I do not support what you're doing.
Well, I'm not totally sure that's the case. As an elected official,
she has to prove their marriage. Well, it's not even marriage; they're pretend marriage.
It's a civil marriage. I mean, you want to pretend marriage. It's not. It may be a Christian marriage if they find. I mean, I have a friend or a couple of friends who were two women married in a Lutheran church. So, I mean, there are plenty of Christians that do this, and not all of them are. Yes, but not historically, I mean, right? You're here to argue now that it violates Christian doctrine that it's incompatible with Christianity for homosexuality to exist, let alone to
homosexuality be condoned as healthy and helpful.
Okay, and again, atheism. Where do you stand on that? Is it against the First Amendment for atheists to be allowed to hold office?
We already talked about no.
But you have this incredibly. I mean, atheists are supposed to be stoned to death. I'm an apostate.
No,
I'm not even just.
We don't
an
live in a
right?
theocracy. Okay, listen.
Exactly. Yes, we don't live in a theocracy, Trey. I don't see where you're so confused.
That's my mouth that said
this.
That. Did you get?
Yeah, and yet you think that a Christian or a person of any particular faith can enforce their particular faith from their position as an agent of the U.S. government, and you don't see how that is in a clear violation of the separation of church and state.
No.
So let me ask you, if I'm about to punch you in the face and somebody grabs my hand to stop me, did that person violate my right?
Yeah, just like you want to violate Kim's right.
So I have a right to just punch you in the face?
Well, again, you're presupposing the sanctity of existence and that there's an intrinsic value to humanity, which our founding fathers held to. Please justify.
I asked you if I have that right. I'm not declaring that I have it.
You're presupposing my position in order to ask me to give an answer, and you need to give justification for your view before you make that.
No, I would like your view on record with this one. Do I have a right to punch you in the mouth?
Hey, Bob. Sorry, my cleaning guy's gonna listen. I gotta go, man. I've got a few things I need to finish up before I go to work. I'm gonna go home, and my son is waiting for me.
All right, I understand, and we did say that we try to keep it to an hour. So it's not you trying to duck out or skip out for the audience here. That was
well, we can do it again. I'm happy to do it
ahead of time. So maybe we can. I feel that I pretty well covered what I wanted to cover about this. I know that you probably don't feel that you were able to cover everything. But sorry, that's the nature of coming onto my show versus me going onto yours.
No, it's okay.
But let me at least do this. I know that you're the one with the time constraint here, but let me give you a few minutes to make a closing statement that I will not argue with at all. I'm just going to sign off after that. So you can go ahead and state your closing argument however you'd like, because I feel that my case is pretty strongly made in this point. I don't really have anything else that I need to say. So
okay. Well, all I'm wanting to say is that I do not believe that Obergefell represents valid constitutional law. So the Supreme Court, in making that decision, necessarily had to nullify the First Amendment. Therefore, it was not an interpretation of the Constitution. It was a changing of the Constitution, something that would have to be done by way of amendment by the legislature, not by the Supreme Court. So I just don't, since there's irreconcilable odds between homosexuality and Christianity, you cannot have the freedom of religion in the First Amendment, and it's at irreconcilable odds, and something's going to have to give, and one's going to rule over the other, and the new one, which is homosexual rights or sexual rights that is new, is going to have to supersede the First Amendment. So that's my problem.
Okay, and I just want to make one final, I guess, clarifying question. When you say that it's a right that is new, do you agree with me that when the Supreme Court makes a decision of this nature, that what they're doing is recognizing a right that they believe to already be contained within the text. Whether you agree with that decision or not, that if it actually is contained, is that what they are doing? Okay.
Yes, they believe it's a 14th Amendment issue, but it's not consistent. So that's a problem.
Okay, so your position basically is that their interpretation of the 14th Amendment violates then your interpretation of the First Amendment.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you for coming on the show here, Trey, and you have a wonderful day. I appreciate your time, and I won't take any more of it. So I guess that's all she wrote for today. Thank you to the audience for joining us, and have a wonderful evening. This has been a special episode of Inspiring Doubt. Signing off.
Thanks, Ray.